Hello, and thank you for joining us at the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon. I'm Pamela Quan, the Executive Director, and on behalf of the entire DisOrient staff, I'm sending a warm welcome from Eugene, Oregon. For 17 years, DisOrient has been on a mission to share the breadth of rich stories in the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. We love to celebrate the art of telling a powerful story in a short film. You're about to meet the filmmakers of the Shorts program, Rooted in Resilience. The films have a common theme of an awareness of the world that comes from being bicultural and bilingual, and that makes our struggles very unique. Let's meet our filmmakers. I'm pleased to introduce the writer, producer, and lead actor of Distansya, Melissa Jane Rodrigues.
Hello, how's it going?
Great to have you. Director, writer, and key cast of Illegitimate Voice, Stefie Gann.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great. Director, writer, and lead actor of Thank You, Come Again, Nirav Bhakta. Hey there. And director of Stories Within, PJ Raval.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here.
Hey, thank you for being here. Let's start by having you all tell us where you're calling from and what your film's about. Let's start with Melissa.
All right. Hello. Thank you for having me. My film is Distansya, and I'm here in Los Angeles. And Distansya, it's a family, a Filipino family dealing with the, actually it starts off as a very happy family. And then we see that their dad actually leaves their family for a younger woman and moves back to the Philippines. So it's kind of picking up the pieces and Distansya because of distance. So even though the family that's still left behind is all in the same house, they end up getting completely emotionally separated from each other. So just kind of trying to rebuild that bond with them, even though their father left.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stefie.
Hello. So I'm calling in from LA. I'm currently at USC, and Illegitimate Voice was made at USC. It's based on my own personal story. It's an animated documentary of growing up or being born in New York City, but then my family went to Malaysia, and then we came back. And that experience of that culture shock, because I didn't remember being American, and also the experience of growing up in an undocumented family and sort of how to process those ideas, and it unfolds in this film.
Yeah. Nirav.
Hi, I'm calling in from Houston, Texas. Thank You Come Again is about an undocumented Indian American convenience store clerk who comes crashing into his subconscious as he grieves the death of his father from an attempted border crossing.
Yeah. PJ.
Hi, I'm joining you from Santa Monica, even though I'm based out of Austin, Texas. So Stories Within is a Austin, Texas based AAPI community documentary series. And the video uncovers moments of hate and exclusion in community members' lives by asking them to address a younger version of themselves. And it's a completely community created documentary.
Thank you. And I think some of you have covered this a little bit, but let's hear what inspired you to select the focus of your film. You know, of all the subjects out there, why did you choose this subject now? Let's go backwards. We'll start with PJ.
Sure. So, you know, as I mentioned, it's a community created piece. So shortly after the Atlanta spa shootings, several AAPI creatives got together, and we decided that we wanted to use our creative skills and our skills of storytelling to somehow create something that we felt would contribute to the community and perhaps even give a moment of healing of some sort. So we got together and started brainstorming, what is it that we want to say, right? And we thought that many of us in the AAPI community felt that when we were growing up, we didn't really have the tools and the language to understand moments of hate or racism or exclusion. And then furthermore, that our stories were not being told, right? And we weren't being encouraged to share our stories. So this is kind of what came out of it, was this documentary series.
Wonderful.
So for Thank You Come Again, it was inspired by a moment in a post 9/11 world where my former immigration status at that point, I was formerly undocumented, meeting this like really interesting crossroad of where brown people or South Asian Americans were seen as either dangerous threats or as comedic caricatures because of Apu from The Simpsons. So I really just wanted to explore what that feeling was like in that moment. And yeah, the film was just based off of that kind of emotional response.
Thank you. Stefie?
So the topic of my film, I mean, the process of how my film got chosen, it was actually, we all pitched our stories, but the reason why I wanted to tell the story, it's been sort of on my mind for a while. I grew up with it, and I actually thought that's why I went into animation and the creative arts, just because I felt like growing up, I didn't have a voice, and I wanted to find a way to express myself. And when I was coming of age, the immigration reform was kind of taking sort of a national conversation, and so many people were telling their stories. I felt so inspired, and I thought, this was something that I've been wanting to do, that was like sort of kept inside me for a while. And it just, after I made this film, it just felt like this pressure was like released, like so many years of just bottled up feelings. So it's been a great experience with everyone.
Thank you.
And for Distansya, it's actually a true story based off of one of my best friends. And I have realized a lot in the Filipino culture in my family. There's a lot of, whenever something bad goes wrong, it's not really talked about. It's a lot of times, sometimes like everything is okay, everyone's happy, and it's just brushed over. And so in this story, after Maddie's dad leaves their family, she's the one who has to take the lead and start that communication again with her mom, instead of just acting like everything's okay when inside everyone's just dying inside because they're not able to connect with each other. So just kind of breaking that thing where that's usually stuck in their heads of, okay, let's just not talk about it and sweep it under the rug, and actually moving forward, and we can get through this together, and we can be stronger because of it. So that's kind of how we started. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that you presented it in a Filipinx family, but I think a lot of Asian Americans can really relate to that. Let's not talk about this.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Of course.
And Melissa and Stefie, both your films are from the viewpoint of young Asian American women. Can you tell us what you hope audiences will understand about your main characters? Melissa?
I'll start. I would love to just be able to use this character to inspire others to be brave enough to step up and take the lead in doing and communicating more and expressing our feelings and knowing that we'll still be loved, and maybe even lead our family to be stronger because of it.
I personally went through this process of feeling more empowered, and I hope that people can share their stories. And I had the sort of the privilege to be in the class where so many filmmakers supported my story and helped me make it come to life. And I hope that I think there is, I was very quiet as a growing up, and I think I wanted to break that stereotype because it was just imposed upon me, and that was part of the pressure. It was just like I didn't say much, and I didn't know how to express myself and to a way where I felt comfortable. And I feel like seeing more people kind of sharing stories that are hard and feel and being well received and supported, I think that could encourage more people to come forward.
Yeah, that's very true. In Distansya, Melissa, what was your writing process like? You acted in it, but you also wrote it.
It went for a couple months, I would say. The director, Raval and I were working through this for a while. But it was actually my first time writing something. So it started off as like, you know, maybe more montagey at points. And then we workshopped it together. And I talked to my friend who experienced this a lot in her real life and just kind of had a lot of good friends help us and look at the drafts and see and just took it from there. But it was, since it was very personal and so in real life, her dad actually passed away shortly after we filmed it. And so it was also emotional because we, you know, I wanted to stay true and respectful to her story. And so it was a lot of, you know, how much are you okay with me saying, and still paying respects to everyone in her family and trying to show that everyone has their side and humanize everyone.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And thank you. And Stefie, your animation, that's, you know, something totally different. How many directors and artists worked on this project, and how'd you get everyone on the same page?
Right. So there were 16 directors and animators, and I'm part of that was why the film was able to be made in a few months. We just had the people to animate because animation takes a long time. And we worked together pretty well. I felt like everyone wanted to make the best story, like create the best film they can. So we were very structured. We went through a storyboarding phase. Well, we had to go through an editing phase. So it was about like an hour long of recordings, and we cut it down to like 3 minutes. So that was quite a cut, and we had to agree on sort of what we needed to shape the story. And we didn't get into too many disagreements. I think overall people sort of saw the vision and agreed, and they always made sure I was comfortable with where I was going because we were all sort of equally directing the piece. And I also work with so many talented animators, so they really brought in like the visuals and everything, just made it great. Besides just, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you know, you lived in so many different places before you were 8 years old. Do you think that had the effect of making you more cautious or more bold?
Right. Yes, when people ask me where I'm from, I always say, oh, I'm in New York. I live in Bay Area now. I'm in LA and I family in Malaysia. It just feels like there are a lot of different kind of connection points that I have. That also makes me more open to ideas and collaborating. I think that has made me very open to sort of listening to people's point of views because I've just sort of always been in so many different places. So I think the nature of collaboration is just very comes naturally to me. Like right now, even I'm working on one film and I'm collaborating with a lot of people. I'm the sole director, but it's just I just love working in a team.
I guess it makes you more adaptable.
Yes, I'd say so.
And Nirav and Stefie, both of you had films that help us understand misconceptions about undocumented people in America. Thank you for your courage in sharing these truths. I'd like to move and talk about Thank You, Come Again. In 2019, you and your co-director, Gayatri Bajpai, were announced as the winners of the HBO Visionaries short film competition for your film Halwa. And it became the first South Asian short form content on HBO. Congratulations on that. You're also in the Academy-sponsored Armed with a Camera Fellowship by Visual Communications, and the director of the CBS Leadership Pipeline Challenge film, Last of the Stars. So you've been busy.
Yeah, thankfully, yeah. I guess, well, sorry, what was your question?
Oh, well, you grew up in Oregon. I haven't asked a question. I just
Oh, sorry.
introduced you and was just in awe.
Thank you.
But, I also thanked you for, telling a story about an undocumented story, because we don't get enough of those. And there's so much misconception out there. Well, let's talk about the title of your film. It's ironic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to take this this term that was kind of weaponized against South Asian Americans for a very long time in a derogatory way. So this is my small way of reclaiming that and humanizing the people that we tend to stereotype or put into tropes that are working in convenience stores. Or yeah, this entire project was just my small way of humanizing undocumented people, humanizing the stereotypes that we've grown up in popular culture and whatnot. So that's where the title came from.
Thanks. And I have to say, I really appreciate your creative approach to storytelling. Can you talk about some of your filmmaking choices?
Yeah, I think for me, like, my approach to filmmaking is always about, I guess, rooted in intention. Like, what do you have to say? If you don't have something to say, then maybe wait, and then really let something center and impact you to your core. So a lot of my work comes from a place of honesty, and even if it's like a subject beyond my reach or capacity, I try to take the due diligence to really immerse myself into that world and try to put myself into somebody's shoes. I think that's the greatest gift that we all have as storytellers, is the gateway of empathy, if you'd say. So yeah, that's pretty much part of my process. It's pretty simple and basic, but
Well, right. You brought the audience along for your main character reliving a past trauma. And it was like we were there with him going through it for the first time. It was just really, really wonderfully done. In one of the shots, you had the store owner putting up an American flag on the window. Can you talk about that?
yeah. So in a post 9/11 world, especially for my family, we were all undocumented and in Texas at the same time. And there was a lot of ignorance and racism going on. And I think people tend to think that immigration is really black and white, or even politically, it's only on one side and not in the other side. But the truth is, like, the moment right after 9/11 was a really, really dark and scary place for South Asian Americans. And at that point, we didn't really have social media or all these things to really have a place for us to unite and speak about the injustices, or share, or come together in that sense. So the American flag was basically, and this is something that we did with our own business fronts, and not just our business fronts, but our vehicles. So we, for the fear of being pulled over, we would plaster American flags on the back of our cars, try to put them in the rear view mirror. We'd put them on our business fronts so that people wouldn't attack our businesses or vandalize our businesses. Some of us even grew up like putting like little American flag patches on our backpacks. So that little moment of symbolism comes from real life experience.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that, but it makes so much sense. And I mean, you also really show how difficult it is to be an immigrant small business owner, you know, things that people might not think about. And especially during this time we've just come through of the pandemic.
Yeah,
You know,
I think what I also wanted to share was this idea of the American dream and the weight of it and how that kind of in a cyclical form lands on the shoulders of like the children and the children of immigrants. And sometimes it is, yes, in some ways it is systemic, but it also, it traps people at times and it's hard to break through. So I think for the lead character in my film, at the end, he's by himself in this convenience store, right? And the shot is from the outside and he's still from in the inside processing what's going on, right? Because he lost his father, this is the only thing that's left of his father's American dream, and he's there upholding that.
great. That's great. And I had read that you studied classical North Indian dance. Is that something that you would work into a film someday? Multi-talented.
Hopefully one day. I try to use it into my writing, to be honest. When I approached North Indian classical dance, it was because I was at a very stagnant place as a performer, and really everything that I do is out of curiosity of what is storytelling to me. So I've dabbed in documentary filmmaking, and then obviously I've been an actor. I've trained as an actor for a very long time, and at some point I was like, okay, what do I do next? You know, all my colleagues are studying Shakespeare or something else, and I'm like, why am I going in this westernized way of thought when my own culture, my own roots have an ancient history of storytelling. So I really joined the Indian classical arts because I wanted to understand storytelling on that kind of level. And through that, I really learned so much about rhythm and pacing that I bring into my narrative films now in terms of writing or even directing. I have a better sense of how things land, because if you are familiar with like the Indian classical arts, there are specific beat cycles, you know. So
And
I
they're fast.
they're fast and they're slow and they're all in all ranges. So yeah, that's where it inspires like now the writing and the filmmaking.
And that makes so much sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And well, I'd like to move on to our other Texan, our other Texas resident, PJ Raval. I tear up every time I watch Stories Within. I've watched it multiple times. And, you know, of course, your film would be phenomenal because your documentary work has screened internationally, and it's appeared on, you've had works appear on Netflix and PBS and Discovery and Showtime. You come with a lot of experience. You're also a Guggenheim Fellow and a leadership team member of the Asian American Documentary Network, ADOC, and a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. You know, if anyone ever thought that the Asian American community was monolithic, they would learn very quickly after watching your film that it's not. And the diversity is just in Austin. I mean, your film is, you know, only showing us a glimpse. We meet 14 individuals that represent Americans who we don't normally get to hear from. Who's represented in Stories Within?
Thank you for that. You know, what we tried to do was hopefully create a cross section of the AAPI community in Austin, Texas, which is incredibly diverse. And so part of our mission was to not only share stories, but also show the faces, right, of who are Asian Americans in the United States. And I think the general public is told one thing, but you know, we know another. So for us, it really is looking at a lot of underserved communities as well, a lot of South Asians, a lot of immigrant communities, refugee communities, for instance, and how exactly what you said, we're not a monolith.
Yeah, great. And now, how did this brilliant concept come up of talking to your younger self about racism?
Well, after a core group of us got together and decided we were going to create some kind of documentary or some kind of storytelling piece that was in the form of filmmaking. We held kind of what we would call maybe a brain trust, where we got together different community members and we asked them what were some of their concerns, what are some of the feelings they have right now, what are some of the challenges they have within their own communities, what would they like to see from a piece like this. And a lot of us uncovered that, we felt like at some point in your life, when you're maturing, you kind of have like the talk with someone, right? To start understanding yourself as a sexual being, start understanding yourself developing and maturing. But, and we started talking about how some of us had friends in other, people of color communities who had had similar talks, maybe with their parents about racism, or just what it's like to be a young Black man, for instance, growing up in the United States. And a lot of us felt like that was a conversation we never had. And so we started thinking about like, well, what I know now and what I've experienced now versus before I experienced it, what would this conversation be like? What would I tell myself about what I've experienced and what I understand from it? And why is it important for me to identify that and talk about it openly? And a lot of these fell in line with this idea of us wanting to create some kind of narrative change, right? Like this idea that, there's a certain narrative of AAPI communities here in the United States. And we see it in the media, we see it in the way that Asian Americans are constantly, sometimes not considered communities of color. Sometimes they're aligned with white communities, for instance. And we really wanted to take control of our own narratives. And in the process of doing that, be able to do that by sharing our narratives and also identifying things that can be really painful and hurtful to us, but have shaped us all, greatly. And letting other community members know that it's okay, right? Like, don't feel the shame because this is not your fault, right? But understand it and work through it. And part of our mission was also to, challenge this idea of the model minority myth, right? Like this idea that, good minorities keep their head down and don't, say anything. And instead, we, wanted to really make this as an offering to the Asian American community and say, like we understand that there are campaigns, for instance, like Stop Asian Hate, right? But for instance, I feel like the Stop Asian Hate campaign is largely addressing other communities, right? Literally saying, please do not hate us, right? Like literally stop hating Asian American communities. And we wanted to create something that was for the Asian American community and to say each of us have a story within us. And so that was the idea of the title, like stories within, right? So let's identify our own stories rather than read the news and say, oh, someone somewhere else experienced some kind of hate crime or experienced some kind of exclusion or racism. We wanted to ask everyone to really think about their own lives and if it's happened to them and the power of uncovering that and being able to name it for what it is.
Yes, you're right. We all do have amazing stories within us. So I think it could not get any more powerful than how you filmed it by positioning the subject's face at eye level directly with the audience, pouring their hearts out about how they've been affected by racism and how racism affects children. It felt like a friend was confiding in you about something really personal. So bravo, that was well done.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And because you had so much material to work with, I'm curious about how you reined it in and kept it at 10 minutes. What was your editing process?
Yeah, well, we worked with the really amazing editor, Ariel Quintans, who is also Filipino American and Austin based. And as I mentioned, there's a core creative team, and some are writers, some are film producers, some are, directors, cinematographers, journalists, community organizers. So all of us kind of threw in our skill set, so to speak, kind of together. But yeah, it was really challenging because there's so many amazing stories. So part of our idea is, we cut together this one video that's kind of, the cross section and kind of a, compilation of stories, but we're hoping to also release the individual stories on their own. Maybe not quite to the extent of like an 8-minute piece, but just so everyone has their own video as well, so you can hear a little bit more about their stories.
I would love that. I think that's great. I feel like this film needs to be shown in schools across the country. It's so moving.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. I mean, we're, part of the reason why we did this was to create some kind of community conversation. So some of the things that we've been doing and we're exploring with right now is we've been screening the film, but also doing some community workshops where we ask AAPI community members to do writing workshops, where it's encouraging them to kind of, think about some of their own stories and ways of writing it down. And I should mention that, what we asked each of the, subjects to do was we asked them a series of questions that they could ruminate over. And a lot of them wrote out actually something they wanted to say. So again, it was a very collaborative process of allowing people to express their story and tell it the way that they wanted to.
Yeah. And I love that both you and Stefie, compiled this beautiful, concise piece and had 14 to 16 people's voices and artwork in it. That is just amazing. I think that's beyond. As we wrap up, I would love to hear about next projects or anything you'd like to tell us about. And particularly for Melissa and Nirav, since you're both actors, if there's anything you'd like to share about that as we wrap up.
Sure, yeah. I just finished up a film. It's called Synagogue, which I'm sure.
Oh,
yeah.
We're showing Synagogue at DisOrient. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we're doing, we just did a short film that I co-wrote and directed actually this time, but I'm acting in it. So it's just basically about giving love and kindness and how a small act of kindness can make a huge difference. So the main character is taking care of her dad who's sick, and then she forgets an ingredient. So on her way to the store, she encounters a teenager who's being bullied, a homeless lady, and her neighbor who's super lonely. And in the end, well, I don't want to give it away, but basically she does something nice for everyone that shows it doesn't matter how old you are or what color your skin is. We can all just be as one, share a meal together, and it makes that huge of a difference in a person's life. And so that's the current baby that I just finished.
Wonderful, up. Great. And you'll have to check out the other short, also called Synagogue, in our program. So
I need to, for sure.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank
PJ,
you.
Yeah. PJ, what's up next for you?
Yeah, I have several different nonfiction and documentary projects. One of them is about a coalition of artists creating a nationwide art activation that fights and challenges migrant and immigrant detention and the culture of incarceration. I have another project that I'm creating about Filipino activists. Yeah, I have several things. I even have a narrative project that I'm developing right now.
Wow, that'll be fun to see.
There'll be more.
Okay, keep in touch. Thanks. Stefie, what do you have going on? Besides school, trying to get through school.
Yes, well, I'm graduating, so my thesis film is based on my experience losing my grandmother while we were here, and so it's a piece to reflect on our childhood and her spirituality. It's supposed to just be a way to connect with people who have, I guess, passed, and so yeah, it was hard for our family, but it was good to be able to kind of reflect on this time in our life.
You. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Nirav, let's hear from you.
On I guess I'm still on the journey of being curious about story and storytelling and looking beyond the mediums of like film and writing and acting to see what that is for me and how that influences me. I'm currently writing my first feature film screenplay, which is exciting and also overwhelming and all that at the same time.
Can
But
you
yeah,
tell us what it's about?
yeah, it's inspired by a true story within my family. It's about a widowed Indian American undocumented mother who makes a relentless journey through the southern border to reunite with her children.
Wonderful. Well, we would love to see that when it's done. So thank you. Good luck with that project.
Thank you.
Everyone's got so many ideas and inspirations. I just want to say that resilience comes not from only taking on difficult challenges, but also how you weather those challenges. And the subjects of all of your films definitely embody that. I would also add that the filmmakers here in our shorts program are also rooted in resilience. Audiences, please remember to rate the films after you watch them because the films are eligible for an Audience Choice Award. And I encourage you to watch as many films as you can at DisOrient. I promise you will learn something new. So let's continue to learn and grow together. And to all the filmmakers here, thank you for telling your stories with such dignity and representing us so well.